Okay, here's our Unit 8A test review, and I'm going to be working every problem on this review, but I'm going to just be doing a section at a time. So I'm going to do 1 through 7 here on this video. The first thing I want to do is remind myself of my 4 I rules that are coming into play. I is going to be anytime you have a negative under a square root. I squared is going to turn into a negative 1. I cubed is going to turn into a negative I, and I to the 4th is going to turn into a positive 1. So i's are okay to have in our solutions. I squareds turn into negative 1's, I cubed turns into negative I, and I to the 4th turns into positive 1. So I'm going to remind myself of those. All right, first thing we got, number 1. If I've got a negative under the square root, I've got to get rid of that negative because I don't want it there, and that tells me I need to have an I. So I'm going to put an I out front. All right, so I've got I, and then square root of 121. We should know off the top of our head, but if you didn't, it's 11 times 11, and those are both prime. And so since I have a pair of 11s, those guys get to come out and join my I. Well, I don't want to write I2. Sorry, I don't want to write I11. I got a couple of 11s. They come out as 1. I don't want to write I11. I want to write 11I. Number 2, we're going to do the same thing here with our square root of 72. We're going to break it down, prime factorization. So 72, we could say 2 times 36. 2 is prime, so we'll circle it. 36, we could say 3 times 12. And you can choose any combination of numbers that multiply to give you 36. You'll end up with the same prime numbers in the end. 12, we got 2 times 6. 6, we've got 2 times 3. Okay, so here I'm looking for pairs. I've got a pair of 2s that get to team up and go out together as 1. I got a pair of 3s that get to team up and go out together as 1. That's not a 2, that's a 3. And my only single guy I have here is a single 2. So the single 2's got to go back inside of the radical by himself. Looking at the x's, I've got 5 of them. And if you want to write them out, some of your teachers have shown you to write them out. 5 of them, we're looking for pairs. 1 pair, I've got 2 pairs of x's that get to team up and go out along with my other numbers. So 2 pairs of x's means I have x squared, and I have 1 single guy that's got to go back in. And my y's, y squared, means I've got 2 of those. Those guys get to pair up and go out together as 1. So I had a pair of 2's and a pair of 3's. We're going to multiply those together to get 6 x squared y. And then the single guys that had to go back home alone, I had a single 2 and I had a single x. Number 3, again, each one of these, you're going to get rid of the negative. You're going to put an I out front. Get rid of the negative, put an I out front. All right, so an I and an I on the outside multiplies to give me I squared on the outside. And again, our I rules, I squared needs to turn into a negative 1 on the outside. So I've got a negative 1, and now I'm going to break these guys down, square root of 10 and square root of 5, and see if anything can join the negative 1. 10 breaks down to 2 times 5, and those are both prime. 5 doesn't break down, so he's by himself. He's just a 5. So I look for pairs of these prime numbers. I do have a pair of 5s. Those pair get to team up and go out together with my negative 1. And the only single guy I have here is a 2, so he's got to go back home alone. So outside I have a negative 1 times 5, so I've got a negative 5 square root of 2. All right, 4, 5, and 6. We are going to use our 4 I rules. Okay, now if you remember, this is the first rule out of the 4 that we learned. I squared is the second rule out of the 4. I cubed is the third rule out of the 4, and I to the 4th is the 4th rule out of 4 that we learned. Now, if you put these as a decimal, that's a 0.25. 1/4 is 0.25. 2 over 4, that's a half, so that's a 0.5. 3/4 is a 0.75, and 4 over 4, that's a whole number. Okay, so what we're going to do, since those 4 repeat over and over again, we're going to take our exponent here, 84, and we're going to divide it by 4. And all I care about is the decimal number. If we don't have a decimal number, we have a whole number, then it's the last one, I to the 4th. So I to the 84th is the same as I to the 4th, but we don't want to use that. I to the 4th needs to turn into a 1. Same thing for problem number 5. We'll take our exponent of 101, divide it by 4. So looking at the decimal only, we get a 0.25. That's 1/4, so that's the first one. So I to the 101 is the same as I. And I is acceptable to have as an answer. Number 6, same thing. We've got 67 divided by 4. Looking at the decimal only, we get a 0.75, which is 3/4, so that's the third one. So I to the 67th is the same thing as I to the 3rd. But we don't want to use I to the 3rd. It's actually I to the 3rd turns into negative I. And the last one on this video, number 7. Back to back to back parentheses tell us we are multiplying. So if I multiply my coefficients together, 4 times negative 3 times 2, we get negative 24. And then when I multiply the i's, I've got I times I times I. That's 3 of them, so that's I cubed. Again, I cubed turns into, if we look at our I rules, I cubed turns into negative I. So really it's negative 24 times, not I cubed, it's negative 24 times negative I. And negative 24 times negative I, negative times negative, is positive 24I. All right, so there's the first 7 problems of the review.